My husband threw his phone at me. Not slammed it, not placed it down carefully. He threw it. "Read it," he said flatly. "I'm bored of hiding it." The phone slid across the kitchen table and stopped right in front of me. For a second, I didn't move. Not because I was afraid of what I'd see, but because something in his voice told me this wasn't a confession. It was a challenge. Like he wanted a reaction. Like he wanted to watch me break. I picked up the phone. The messages were already open. A conversation with a man saved under a coworker's name. I scrolled up. Weeks, then months. It started playful. Compliments, jokes, late-night check-ins. Then it crossed a line so quietly it almost felt intentional. Explicit messages, complaints about me, about our marriage, about how she felt trapped, about how she deserved more, about how he made her feel alive again. Plans to meet, hotel jokes, deleted messages hinted at but never fully erased. I read for maybe 2 minutes. Then I set the phone down and slid it back across the table to him. "Noted," I said. He stared at me like he hadn't expected that. "That's it?" he asked. "That's all you're going to say?" "What do you want me to say?" I replied. "You've already said everything." "I want you to react," he snapped. "I want you to care." "I do care," I said calmly. "But I'm not going to perform for you. You made your decision months ago. I'm just acknowledging it." "You're not even going to fight for us?" "There's no US to fight for," I said. "You threw that away when you started sleeping with him." "I never said I slept with him." "You didn't have to," I answered. "The messages say enough." He took another sip of wine and leaned back in his chair. "So what now?" "Now," I said, standing up, "I figure out what comes next. And you should probably start doing the same." I walked upstairs to our bedroom. His purse was on the dresser. I took the spare house key off the key ring, the one to my mother-in-law's house that he'd carried for years. Then I grabbed a folder from my office drawer. I'd been keeping it for 3 months. Because I'm not stupid. I'm 42 years old, married for 16 years, 2 kids, a life we built fast because he was pregnant when we were in our mid-20s, a house in the suburbs, decent careers, family vacations every summer, the usual script. I thought we were happy. Turns out I was the only one following the script. I walked back downstairs, past the kitchen without saying another word, and went straight to my car. "Where are you going?" he called after me. "Out," I said. "When will you be back?" "When I'm ready." I drove straight to his mother's house with one folder on the passenger seat, and the silence that followed after that said everything. I'm 42 now, and until very recently, I believed I was living a normal, imperfect, but solid marriage. 16 years together. 2 children. A shared history long enough that it felt permanent simply because of how much life had already passed inside it. We met in our mid-20s. I was fresh out of graduate school, focused, practical, the kind of woman who believed stability was something you built deliberately. He was charming, confident, and impulsive in ways that felt exciting back then. We dated fast. Too fast, some people said. But when I found out I was pregnant, we decided not to hesitate. We got married within the year. And somehow it worked, or at least it seemed to. We built a life that looked good from the outside. A house in the suburbs, decent careers, family vacations every summer, birthdays, school events, routines that stacked up into something that felt like commitment. I believed in the script. I followed it carefully. I showed up. I carried weight. I made sacrifices without keeping score. Our children became the center of everything. I adjusted my career more than he did, took fewer risks, chose predictability. I told myself that was what partnership looked like. One person steadies the ship while the other pushes forward. For a long time, I thought we were happy. Looking back now, there were signs I ignored because they didn't fit the version of our marriage I needed to believe in. His phone always face down, new passwords he never shared, longer workdays with vague explanations, sudden interest in his appearance, in being noticed again, in feeling alive, as he liked to put it. I didn't accuse him. I didn't spy. I trusted him, because trust was the foundation I thought we had earned. But last summer, something shifted in my body before it shifted in my mind. A quiet unease, the feeling that I was living alongside someone who was no longer fully present. Conversations felt transactional. Affection felt scheduled. Intimacy felt like obligation. I started paying attention, not out of jealousy, out of self-preservation. I noticed credit card charges that didn't make sense, restaurants I'd never been to, hotels booked on nights he claimed he was working late. I checked our shared phone plan and saw location gaps that didn't align with his stories. I didn't confront him. I documented screenshots, statements, Dates, patterns. I even hired a private investigator for 2 weeks in September. I told myself it was temporary, just to confirm or dismiss the fear. The confirmation came faster than I expected. Photos, timelines, proof. By then, I wasn't angry. I was focused. I started preparing for the end quietly because I knew exactly the kind of person I was married to. Someone who would control the narrative, someone who would cry to his family, blame stress, paint me as cold, unforgiving, distant. That's why I kept the folder. That's why when he threw the phone at me, I wasn't shocked. I had already been grieving the marriage for months. What I didn't expect was how quickly he would try to flip the story once the truth came out, or how important it would become to make sure the people closest to us saw the facts before the performance. Because 16 years together doesn't protect you from betrayal. It just makes the fallout louder. Once I started looking back with clear eyes, the warning signs lined up in a way that made my stomach turn. They weren't dramatic. They were quiet, ordinary, easy to explain away if you wanted to keep the peace. He stopped leaving his phone on the counter. It was always face down, always within reach. When I asked for the passcode once, casually, the way married people do, he laughed it off and said he kept changing it for security reasons. I told myself that made sense. I didn't want to be the suspicious wife. I didn't want to become someone who interrogated instead of trusted. He began coming home later, not outrageously late, just late enough to feel inconvenient. Traffic, meetings that ran long, a last-minute drink with coworkers. He said it so easily that I questioned my own instincts instead of his stories. When I pointed out that these late nights were happening more often, he told me I was overthinking. I backed off. That was my mistake. Around the same time, his patience with me thinned. Little things annoyed him. Questions about schedules, comments about money. Even silence seemed to irritate him, like my presence alone reminded him of something he wanted to escape. When I tried to reconnect, suggested a date night or a weekend away, he said he was tired, overwhelmed, stressed, always stressed. I carried more of the load at home without making a big deal of it. Packed lunches, managed school schedules, handled appointments. I told myself this was just a phase, that marriages went through cycles, that commitment meant pushing through dry seasons without keeping score. But commitment shouldn't feel like invisibility. The first concrete red flag came in July. I noticed a hotel charge on our credit card from a place downtown. When I asked him about it, he didn't miss a beat. Conference overflow, he said. They booked us rooms last minute. He even named a colleague who'd supposedly been there too. Later that week, I casually mentioned the hotel to that colleague's wife at a school event. She looked confused. That was when my chest tightened in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. I didn't confront him that night. I went home and opened a new folder on my computer. I labeled it with a date, then another. I started saving screenshots, credit card statements, location pings from our shared plan, text timestamps that didn't align with the stories he told me. I wasn't trying to catch him in the act. I was trying to protect myself from gaslighting. By August, the patterns were undeniable. Restaurants I'd never heard of, late nights that ended near the same apartment complex across town, gaps in his timeline that always fell on the same days of the week. I hired a private investigator for 2 weeks, something I never imagined myself doing, but by then I wasn't chasing truth for closure. I needed certainty for strategy. The investigator confirmed what my body already knew. Photos of him entering another man's building, leaving hours later, repeating the same routine. No ambiguity, no misunderstanding. Still, I didn't confront him. I kept living our routine for the kids. Packed backpacks, made dinners, asked about homework, smiled in public. I was already preparing the exit quietly because I knew that when the truth finally surfaced, it would be loud, and I needed to be calm when that happened. I didn't expect him to throw his phone at me. I didn't expect him to challenge me to read the messages like it was a power move. But the moment he did, I understood something clearly. He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted control. And once I saw that, there was no going back to pretending everything was fine. 3 weeks ago, everything finally broke the surface. It was a Thursday, ordinary in every way that matters. I got home around 6:30, the same time I always did. The kids were still at their after-school programs and wouldn't be back until 7. The house was quiet in that in-between way. Not peaceful, just empty. I walked into the kitchen and found my husband sitting at the table. His phone lay in front of him. A glass of wine, already half empty, sat by his hand. He didn't look up when I came in. "We need to talk," he said. My stomach dropped instantly. No one starts a conversation like that unless something has already collapsed. Okay, I replied carefully. About what? He picked up his phone, unlocked it, and threw it across the table toward me. Read it, he said. I'm bored of hiding it. The phone skidded to a stop right in front of me. For a moment, the room felt unreal, like I'd stepped into a scene that had already been rehearsed without me. I picked up the phone. The messages were open. A conversation saved under a coworker's name. I scrolled. Weeks, then months. It started light. Compliments. Flirty jokes. Late-night messages. Then it crossed a line so gradually it almost felt deliberate. Explicit texts. Complaints about me. About our marriage. About how he felt trapped. About how he deserved more. About how the other man made him feel alive again. Plans to meet. References to nights I thought he was working late. Little comments about hotels, about being careful, about deleting threads. I read for about 2 minutes. Then I set the phone down and slid it back across the table. Noted, I said. He looked up at me sharply, confusion flashing across his face. That's it? He asked. You're not going to say anything else? What do you want me to say? I asked. You've already said it all. I want you to react, he snapped. I want you to care. I do care, I said calmly, but I'm not going to give you a performance. You've been making this choice for months. I'm just acknowledging it. You're not even going to fight for us? There's no U.S. to fight for, I replied. You ended that when you started sleeping with him. I never said I slept with him, he shot back. You didn't have to, I said. The messages make it clear enough. He leaned back and took another sip of wine, almost defiant. So what now? He asked. Now, I said, standing up, I figure out what comes next. And you should probably start doing the same. I walked out of the kitchen and went upstairs to our bedroom. His purse was on the dresser. I took the spare house key off the keyring, the one to his mother's house that he'd carried for years. Then I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the folder I'd been building quietly for 3 months. I came back downstairs, walked past the kitchen without another word, and headed straight for the front door. Where are you going? He called after me. Out. When will you be back? When I'm ready. I drove away with the folder on the passenger seat. That drive wasn't emotional, it was focused. Because by the time he decided to stop hiding, I had already decided I wouldn't be caught unprepared. And the first place I was going was the one place where his version of the story wouldn't survive. The drive across town felt longer than it actually was. 25 minutes, give or take. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry. I kept both hands on the steering wheel and focused on the road like it was the only thing keeping me upright. The folder sat on the passenger seat, heavier than paper should be, not because of its contents, but because of what it represented. Proof, preparation, the end of pretending. When I pulled up to my mother-in-law's house, the lights were on. She answered the door wearing that same surprised smile she always had when visits weren't planned. Oh, hello, she said. I wasn't expecting you. Is everything all right? No, I said honestly. Can I come in? She stepped aside without hesitation. I sat on the couch in her living room while she lowered herself into the chair across from me. I could see the worry forming on her face before she even asked. What's happened? Your son threw his phone at me today, I said, keeping my voice level. Told me to read his messages with a coworker. He said he was bored of hiding it. Her face went pale. He did what? I opened the folder and laid it on the coffee table between us. Inside were printed screenshots of messages I'd saved weeks earlier, credit card statements showing hotel charges and restaurant bills on nights he claimed he was working late, photos from the investigator of him entering and leaving another man's apartment building. I've known for 3 months, I continued. I was gathering evidence before filing for divorce. He just decided to speed things up. Her hands shook as she picked up the papers. She read slowly, carefully, like she was hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less devastating. When she looked up, tears were already in her eyes. I don't understand, she whispered. Why would he do this? You'd have to ask him, I said. But I wanted you to see this before he tries to rewrite the story, before he makes me the villain. She wiped her eyes. What are you going to do? File for divorce, I said. Fight for custody. Try to come out of this with some dignity intact. The kids will be told an age-appropriate version of the truth, not the details. Just that their father made choices that ended the marriage. She nodded slowly. I'm so sorry. You've been nothing but good to him, to this family. I appreciate that, I said. But I need you to remember something. When he calls you crying, when he tells you his side, remember that you saw this first. I didn't come here to poison you against him. I came to make sure you had the facts. I won't forget, she said quietly. She walked me to the door and hugged me, the kind of hug that felt like an apology for someone else's choices. "If you need anything," she said, "I know where to find you." When I drove home, his car was gone. The kids were back, confused, asking where their dad was. I told them he had to run out for something. I made dinner, helped with homework, got them to bed at the usual time. I kept everything normal for them, while the foundation of our life cracked underneath. That night, he didn't come home. He texted around 11, saying he was staying at a friend's house. I didn't respond. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney, and that was when the quiet part of the war began. By Friday afternoon, the reality of what was happening had settled into my bones. I had a consultation scheduled with a divorce attorney for Monday morning, and just knowing that gave me a strange sense of control. Not relief. Control. There's a difference. Relief comes later. Control is what keeps you standing in the middle of a storm. That afternoon, my mother-in-law called me. "He came here last night," she said, her voice tight. "He was hysterical, kept asking why you weren't supporting him, why you were turning everyone against him." "What did you tell him?" I asked. "That I'd seen the evidence," she replied, "that I was disappointed, that he needed to take responsibility for his actions." I closed my eyes for a moment. How did he take that? "Not well," she said. "He accused you of manipulating the situation, of poisoning me against him." "And you told him?" "That I read the messages with my own eyes," she said firmly, "that no manipulation was required." I exhaled. "Is he still there?" "No, he left this morning. I don't know where he went." "Thank you for telling me," I said, and I meant it. That weekend felt surreal. The kids sensed something was wrong but didn't push. They asked where their dad was. I told them he needed some time to himself. Kids are perceptive. They hear what isn't said. They notice what's missing. Sunday night, he finally came home. It was just after 8. The kids were already in bed. I was sitting in the living room with a book I hadn't been reading, waiting without meaning to. He stood in the doorway, looking smaller than I remembered, exhausted, cornered. "Can we talk?" he asked. "If you want to," I replied. He sat in the chair across from me, the same one he'd chosen the night he threw the phone. "I've been thinking about everything," he said, "about what I want, and I want to make this work. I want to fix us." "There's nothing to fix," I said calmly. "You broke this deliberately." "I made a mistake." "You made hundreds of mistakes," I replied. "Every text, every lie, every time you chose him over our family. Those weren't accidents, those were decisions." "So that's it?" he snapped. 16 years and you're just done?" "You were done months ago," I said. "I'm just catching up." "What about the kids?" "We'll co-parent," I said. "Figure out custody. Minimize the damage you've already caused." "You're really going to divorce me over this?" "Yes." That's when he started crying. Not the quiet, remorseful kind. The angry kind. The kind that comes from someone who didn't expect consequences. "This is exactly like you," he said bitterly. "Cold. Unforgiving. No wonder I looked elsewhere." "You can tell yourself whatever story helps you sleep," I replied, "but we both know the truth." He went upstairs. I heard drawers opening, bags being packed. 20 minutes later, he came back down. "I'm staying with a friend," he said. "We can figure out the details later." "My attorney will contact you," I said. "You already got an attorney?" he demanded. "I've had one for 3 weeks," I replied. "I was just waiting to file." His face flushed red. "You've been planning this." "I've been preparing for the inevitable," I said. "There's a difference." He slammed the door hard enough to wake the kids. They came downstairs scared and confused. I told them their dad and I were having some problems, and that we'd talk more in the morning. I got them back to bed, then sat on the couch until 3 in the morning, staring at the wall. By Monday morning, I filed for divorce. By Monday afternoon, he was served. By Monday night, my phone was lighting up with messages swinging wildly between rage and desperation. "How dare you serve me at work?" "Everyone's asking questions." "You humiliated me. Please, can we just talk?" I replied to exactly one message. "Contact me through attorneys only." Then I blocked his number and set up all communication through a parenting app. Clean boundaries. No room for manipulation. And that's when someone else reached out. Someone who would make the situation even clearer than it already was. On Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with a name I didn't recognize. It was his coworker's wife. She asked if we could meet for coffee, said we had mutual friends and that she thought it might be important. I agreed, not because I wanted more information, but because I already knew how these stories tend to overlap. Betrayal has patterns. Once you see one clearly, the others start to reveal themselves without effort. She arrived looking tired, not dramatic, not angry, just worn down in the way people get when they've been doubting their own instincts for too long. "I saw the divorce filing," she said quietly after we ordered. "My husband's name is in it. I'm sorry you're finding out this way." "I'm not surprised," I replied, and I wasn't. She nodded, relief flickering across her face. "I've suspected for months. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. Seeing your filing finally gave me certainty." That word again, certainty. The thing my husband claimed he needed space to find, while quietly dismantling our family. She filed for divorce, too. We sat there for nearly an hour, two women who had never met before, bonded by the same deception. We talked about kids, about routines, about how our husbands convinced themselves they were special, that their connection justified detonating two marriages. "They thought they were different," she said before we stood to leave. Like what they had was rare enough to excuse everything. "They weren't special," I said. "They were selfish." I walked back to my car and sat there for a few minutes before driving away. That conversation didn't bring closure, it brought confirmation. The last thread of doubt unraveled quietly, and with it went any lingering hope that this was a misunderstanding I might regret not fixing. That night, the weight finally hit me. Not as panic, not as fear, as grief. I grieved the marriage I thought I had. The years I believed meant protection. The idea that shared history guaranteed shared values. I lay awake listening to the house settle, the familiar creaks and hums suddenly foreign, and felt the lonelinesses of standing at the bottom of something I hadn't chosen to break. That was the lowest point. Not the confrontation, not the evidence, not the divorce papers. The moment I accepted that the person I built my life with was never the person I thought he was. And once you accept that, you can stop trying to save what never truly existed. The turning point didn't come with a grand realization or a dramatic speech. It arrived quietly, the morning after I met his coworker's wife, when I woke up and noticed something unfamiliar. I wasn't anxious. For weeks, my body had been living in survival mode. Tight chest, shallow breaths, that constant hum of alertness you carry when you're bracing for the next hit. That morning, it was gone. Not replaced by happiness, not even relief, just calm. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had thrown the phone at me, and I realized something important. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was deciding. I reviewed the evidence again, not because I needed reassurance, but because I needed clarity for the next phase. Messages, timelines, financial records, the investigator's report, everything aligned. There was no version of this story where reconciliation made sense, not because I was unforgiving, but because forgiveness doesn't rebuild trust that was dismantled methodically. Later that day, my attorney called to walk me through what would happen next. Custody considerations, documentation, how to protect the kids from being pulled into adult conflict. I took notes calmly, asked direct questions, gave clear answers. The fog lifted completely. That afternoon, I sat down with the kids. I didn't give them details. I didn't assign blame with anger. I told them their father had made choices that hurt our family and that we were going to live separately while adults figured things out. I told them they were loved, that none of this was their fault, and that routines would stay as normal as possible. They asked hard questions. I answered the ones I could honestly and gently. When I didn't know how to answer, I said so. They cried. I held them. And for the first time since the truth came out, I felt like I was fully in my role again. Not as a wife trying to fix something broken, but as a mother protecting stability. That night, he sent another message through the parenting app. Apologetic, defensive, confused. I read it once and didn't respond. Not because I was punishing him, but because nothing in it changed my decision. The power shift was complete. He no longer dictated the pace, the tone, or the outcome. The chaos he created stopped at the boundaries I set. I realized that what felt like strength wasn't loud. It was consistency. Follow through. Choosing not to be pulled back into the same cycle under a different name. I slept deeply that night. And when I woke up, I didn't feel like someone whose life had been taken from her. I felt like someone who had taken it back. The fallout unfolded faster than I expected, and slower at the same time. Fast in the courtroom, slow in the spaces between school drop-offs, grocery lists, and the quiet hours after the kids were asleep. Once the divorce filings were active, his tone changed. Through the parenting app, he oscillated between anger and self-pity. One day he accused me of being cold and vindictive. The next, he begged for one more conversation, insisting we owed each other closure after 16 years. I kept my responses brief and factual, only about the children. Every message that drifted toward blame or emotion went unanswered. Boundaries weren't cruelty, they were oxygen. Then his attorney made their move. They pushed for full custody, painting me as an absent, career-focused mother who had emotionally checked out long before the affair. They suggested my composure was evidence of detachment, that my preparation was proof of calculation. It was surreal watching my steadiness reframed as neglect. My attorney didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. In one afternoon, she laid out the timeline, the months-long affair, the hotel charges, the investigator's photos, the messages where he mocked our marriage and bragged about deceiving me. She produced school calendars, pediatric appointments, teacher emails, carpools, evidence of my daily presence in our children's lives. Character witnesses spoke calmly about my involvement. The judge asked a few pointed questions. The narrative collapsed. The ruling granted joint custody, with me designated as the primary residential parent. He received every other weekend and one dinner during the week. He was furious. He told anyone who would listen that I had turned the court against him. I didn't respond. Courts don't turn. Evidence does. Around the same time, his coworker's divorce finalized. From mutual acquaintances, I learned it hadn't gone well for him. Assets divided unfavorably. Primary custody granted to his wife. Resentment set in. The two men who had convinced themselves they were exceptional began blaming each other. Their relationship ended within weeks. That's when he tried to come back. Through the app, he wrote that he had made the worst mistake of his life, that he was willing to do therapy, counseling, anything. He asked if we could reconsider for the kids. I replied once, "Our divorce will proceed. Please limit communication to child-related matters only." His mother called me, voice tired. She said he was spiraling, refusing responsibility, making reckless choices. She asked, carefully, if reconciliation was possible. I answered honestly. The best thing I can do for the kids is show them what self-respect looks like. Staying would teach them the opposite. She paused, then agreed. She said she wished her son could see what he'd lost. I told her he would eventually, but that wasn't my work anymore. Months passed. He lost his job amid rumors of inappropriate behavior. He moved apartments. The kids returned from visits unsettled by inconsistent rules and unfamiliar faces. I documented everything, calmly, methodically. My attorney advised patience. Build the record. When the time came, the hearing was brief. He arrived disheveled, unemployed, unable to demonstrate stable housing. The judge modified custody. Supervised visitation every other week. It was devastating for him. Necessary for the children. He blamed me. He always would. But the people who mattered, teachers, doctors, family, had seen the pattern. They didn't need persuasion. They had lived the consequences alongside us. I didn't celebrate the fallout. I absorbed it. I protected my children. And I kept moving forward, even when the ground behind me was still settling. It's been 2 years since the night he threw the phone at me. 2 years since I took the spare key from his purse and drove across town with a single folder, choosing facts over fury, preparation over pleading. 2 years since I stopped performing the role of a wife who fixes things and became a woman who protects what matters. The kids are doing okay. Therapy helped. Routine helped. Truth, told carefully and age-appropriately, helped most. They understand that their father made choices that ended the marriage. They don't hate him, but they aren't confused anymore. Stability has a way of teaching children what words cannot. I started dating again, slowly, intentionally. The woman I'm seeing knows the whole story. She's met the kids. She understands the baggage and doesn't rush the future. There's no urgency to prove anything. Just presence, just consistency. That's enough. My ex is still struggling. Last I heard, he moved to another city, chasing a reset that never quite arrives when accountability is missing. The kids see him occasionally for supervised visits when he follows through. His mother stays in touch with me, more than with him. She shows up to school events, helps with pickups when I'm stuck at work. In many ways, she's become more of a co-parent than her own son ever was. Sometimes she tells me she mourns the daughter-in-law she thought she had. I tell her I mourn the marriage I thought I had, but I don't mourn ending it. That night, when he threw the phone, he thought he was asserting power. He thought he could shock me into submission, force a reaction, make me fight for something he'd already abandoned. He misunderstood something fundamental. I had agency too. I had evidence, I had options, I had the ability to walk away with my dignity intact. People ask if I regret how I handled it, if I should have tried harder to save the marriage. But you can't save something the other person is actively destroying. All you can do is get out before you drown with it. The folder I brought to his mother's house wasn't revenge. It was protection. I knew he would try to control the narrative, cry to family, cast himself as the victim, paint me as cold. By putting the facts in front of the people who mattered first, I made that impossible. Was it calculated? Yes. Was it necessary? Absolutely. Betrayal doesn't deserve warmth. It deserves clarity, boundaries, and consequences. My kids are learning that now, not from lectures, but from watching how I handled their father's choices, how I didn't insult him to them, how I didn't ask them to choose sides, how I refused to pretend everything was fine, how I showed them that you can love someone and still leave when they hurt you. The spare key I took that night was a small thing, but it meant something bigger. I was taking back access. He had opened doors he shouldn't have. I was closing the ones he'd taken for granted. That drive to his mother's house was the last time he controlled any narrative about my life. Every decision after that, every boundary, every filing, every step forward was mine. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's simple and hard and necessary. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. When trust is broken deliberately, don't negotiate your self-respect. And when a life is falling apart, prepare quietly and act decisively. I didn't lose 16 years. I gained my future. And that's something no betrayal can take back.